Welcome to Eckstein Hall. I am MUTV Sports Director Mike Cianciolo. Also with me is the sports editor of the Marquette Tribune, Patrick Leary. And we have a very special guest with us here on Marquette's campus, Dr. Mark Emmert, the NCAA President. Thanks for coming, Dr. Emmert.
My pleasure. Good to be here with you guys.
Thank you for coming. First of all, can you just talk about why you decided to make the trip to Marquette and what you hope to gain from visiting us in Milwaukee?
Sure. Well, I'd been invited some time ago to come here to the law school to speak at your policy forum, and I was delighted to have that opportunity. And whenever I go to a campus, I want to make sure that I spend time with students, get an opportunity to interact with them and do Q&A with them. And so I'm going to spend time both with your athletic department and athletes, with your law students, and of course with you guys.
Awesome. Can you take us through an average day as the NCAA president and maybe touch on some things that people might not know that the NCAA president does?
Well, I'm not sure there's anything like an average day. I travel an awful lot, so I'm out of the office almost 2/3 of the time, it seems. Going out on campuses, visiting with students, visiting with coaches and administrators around the country. And so actually a typical day would be doing something not unlike what we're doing here. When I'm in Indianapolis, then I'm working with all of our staff and all of the members that come into Indianapolis for meetings. So we have presidents and ADs and coaches and faculty reps and student athletes all coming into Indianapolis for various things. So it would typically entail a lot of meetings with our staff, a lot of meetings with the people that come into the room, talking about the big policy questions that face the whole collegiate athletic experience, and then trying to get as much time as I can with students, which is the hardest part.
Dr. Emmert, recently, specifically to Marquette, the Big East underwent a lot of change and restructuring, and the American Athletic Conference was formed. Can you talk about the impact of that on the entire college sports landscape and what you do?
Well, obviously it was a pretty dramatic set of shifts, and it focused a lot of our attention for much of this last year. The NCAA is, as you're well aware, a voluntary association of about 1,100 schools, about 450,000 student athletes across all three divisions. So we govern all of the sports that are conducted in all those championships. But one thing we don't have control over, and the membership has never wanted the association to worry about, is conference membership. So those decisions are completely up to the individual universities that make up a conference, and then schools themselves as to which conference they want to join and where they want to be. So we didn't have a lot of a role in all of that, but it was very interesting to watch it, and my role was predominantly to remind people that they needed to be thoughtful about what this really meant for student athletes, what it really meant for the good of the broader game. It left the landscape quite a bit different. Obviously, we lost some traditional rivalries, and we've gained some that 10, 20 years from now will be considered new rivalries, I'm sure. It was predominantly realignment around media rights, especially around football. That was the big driver for the five major conferences. And I think we've largely seen the end of that. There might be a little bit of movement, but I don't think very much from here on in.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Do you see an end game to conference realignment where schools will decide, okay, we are good where we are and we don't have to move ever again? Do you ever see that happening?
Well, forever is a long, long time, but let's say for 10 years or so. And so, yeah, I think we're pretty close to that now. I mean, there could be one or two schools that move around at the highest levels of Division I. There's still going to be some sorting out among smaller conferences because there's some domino effect going on there, and there might even be some in other parts of Division I around FCS football. But mostly it's pretty well settled down at the top, and that's a good thing. Now, conferences have always changed. There's always been movement, so I would expect over the next 5 to 10 years there'll be some more bouncing around. But I think the big moves are done for now.
In the fall of 2012, Marquette men's basketball was exposed for having violating NCAA recruiting rules. That resulted in the firing of assistant coach Scott Monarch and a self-imposed one-game suspension of Buzz Williams. Can you talk about what precedence the NCAA holds over all forms of recruiting violations, and also how you feel on teams self-imposing discipline?
Yeah. So. First of all, let me describe the way those decisions are made. So when people think about the NCAA, they often think about the president, Mark Emmert, and think of it a bit like I play a role like Roger Goodell in the NFL. nothing's further from the truth. I mean, if you think about my job, you need to think more like Secretary General of the United Nations, more like Ban Ki-moon than Roger Goodell. So all of those decisions, like those penalties that you were referring to, those are all decided upon by a committee called the Committee on Infractions that's made up of members across all of the country. So that committee has commissioners and athletic directors and faculty reps and citizen lawyers on it. So it's a bit of a jury of your peers. When they have a case come before them, they look at all of our rules that are potentially violated. We cover recruiting in a complex set of rules, I believe overly complex set of rules. And those rules govern a variety of ways in which schools can and cannot interact with potential student athletes. The whole idea is to make sure that the process is fair, that there's not underhanded dealing among recruits and boosters and others, and that student athletes aren't taken advantage of. And so that's evolved over the past 40 years or so to be this very thick, complicated rule book governing recruitment. We have an investigative team that if there's allegations that something went wrong, they'll go out and they'll conduct investigations. They take all that information, they give it to the Committee on Infractions, this independent body, and then they pass judgment on it. And when they're making their decisions, they look at the self-imposed penalties. They say, okay, what did this university do or this college do? Did they recognize that mistakes were made? Did they put in place systems to prevent that from happening in the future? Did they take serious steps to mitigate those wrongs? And if they did, then they certainly take that into consideration when they're deciding if there's going to be any more penalties.
Sure. Recently, the NCAAcom online store stopped selling team-affiliated jerseys. Can you talk about the decision that was made in that regard and sort of why that decision was made when it was?
Yeah, well, I was the one that made the decision, so yeah, I can talk a lot about it. The NCAA.com store is simply an online store that was an aggregator of the jersey sales, for example, in this case, that occur at individual schools. So if you wanted to buy a Marquette jersey, you could go to NCAA.com and buy it through NCAA.com, but it was really behind the scene, behind the website, a sale with Marquette. You could, I assume, go online today to Marquette's website and buy that same jersey right now. It was just really a convenience that the NCAA was offering through NCAA.com. Because of the controversy around being able to go online and look at a name and have a specific jersey and number come up, I deemed that was just an inappropriate thing for us to be doing. We don't want, and it's in fact against our rules, to have somebody selling a student athlete's name. And so our system, quite inadvertently, nobody really planned it. We have independent parties that put all these things together. We don't do it, but that doesn't mean we're not responsible. So when we realized that was going on, we immediately shut it down, and I said, just take that part offline. We really don't have any business being in the business of selling jerseys for Marquette or any other school. So we're only now selling products on that line that involve our championships or events that we have control over that are part of the NCAA as a whole, not individual schools. It just seemed like an inappropriate thing for us to be doing.
Dr. Emmert, many people say that schools are doing enough by providing campus housing and education for student athletes, but then on the flip side, there are other people that would disagree and say that there needs to be more done for those athletes. What is your view on the pay-for-play debate?
Well, I'm adamantly opposed to pay for play, if by that you mean a system that converts student athletes into employees of universities or colleges. Today, under the rules that the members have decided on, a full athletic scholarship provides tuition fees, room and board, books and supplies, which is a pretty good deal, obviously, for those of you paying for all of those things. But on the other hand, that model has been in place for about 40 years. During that 40 years, almost everything has changed in college sports and in life in general. So the piece that's an active debate now among the members, not among the sports columnists and opinion writers, but among the member universities themselves, is should that scholarship model be expanded to cover what in higher education parlance is called the full cost of attendance, what it really costs to be a student. So you all know as students, you got tuition fees, room, board, books, and supplies, but then you also have miscellaneous expenses, transportation money to go to and from home, you need clothes once in a while, you need laundry money, you need, meals on weekends, you have all of those additional costs. That number, that miscellaneous expense number, varies from school to school. It averages around $3,000 per student at most universities, probably something like that, or a little more here, maybe at Marquette because you're in the city. And so the debate right now is, can you provide a little more in the scholarship that covers the real cost of being a student? Full-time Division I athletes right now, they're working a lot harder than they did 40 years ago. They're putting in 30 or 40 hours a week as a student. As a student and an athlete. And so we've raised the academic demands, we've raised the amount of time it takes to be a successful D1 athlete. So the notion is, look, they don't have time for part-time jobs anymore. They don't have time to worry about and cover that miscellaneous expense. Should universities be allowed to fill that little gap, that $2,000 or $3,000 gap? The Division I board has twice said yes, they should be able to. They've passed it twice. And it was shot down by the full membership because all 350 Division I schools can vote on these things, and they voted on it and they voted it down. But I think we haven't seen the end of that. I think many people want to revisit it, and so we'll probably see it back in debate here in the next few months.
Just as sort of a wrap-up question,
What do you see as the role of the NCAA going forward in the ever-evolving college landscape, maybe 5 or 10 years down the road?
Sure. Well, the NCAA for more than 100 years now has been the only organization that's in a position to do really three things. The first is they have the interests of student athletes first and foremost as their focus, making sure that the health and welfare and well-being of student athletes is preeminent. That's why it was formed 100 years ago. That remains the core of its mission today. And we're expanding that also to make sure that it really is about the success of student athletes. We want them to be successful in the classroom, in life, and on the court. And the association exists to pass rules that try and enforce and ensure that that be the case. The second piece is that we run 89 championships, and so no other body can run national championships. We run 89 national championships across every sport in all three divisions. We do that extremely well. We're really proud of those things. Students love participating in championships. For almost every athlete, getting to an NCAA championship is the goal, and we run that, and we love doing that. And then the third piece is this special mission to oversee the integrity of all of college sport, that the NCAA as a whole, all the members come together and say, here's the things we'll accept as appropriate behavior, and here's the things that are inappropriate behavior. And the NCAA has the responsibility to make sure that integrity in the games and in institutions is maintained. So those three things I don't think are going to change much at all. How some of those things get done will constantly be evolving. How they're financed and what the membership is will always be changing, but that core mission is not going to change, I'm sure.
Thank you for your time, Dr.
My
Emmert.
pleasure. Good to be with you guys.
Thank you.
Yep. Well done.